can those combat our loyalties to the gospel, to the Savior, and to the truth? So as an introduction here, I want to go over these following points. This will not be, there's not a lot of PowerPoint I'm going to go over. I'll go over that for the reason behind that in a minute. But the slides will be very generalized. This is not a common fireside topic, I would suggest. There is adult and explicit information that I will try and navigate appropriately as we go through this. I will do my best to give information and not conclusions. I may not be perfect with that, but I will add some assumptions as well as we go through this story. And I will only briefly discuss President Ballard's involvement. This has been a big story, especially for those that are attacking the church. And there are lessons to be learned here for all of us from this story. I think that as we see what is unfolding here, to me, this is a precursor to what we will find more and more down the road. As we live in the age of the internet, and there are those that move off into the mists of darkness, and as a metaphor of Lehi's dream, are we going to hang on to the rod of iron, or do we move off into those mists with those individuals? And, one thing I've noticed recently is, we're becoming a more and more critical and cynical culture, especially in the West and especially in the United States. And there are incidents, events, and people and topics that might try our patience and might try our testimonies. And for many people, this is one of them. Tim Ballard is a huge hero and a patriot and, an example that many have held up at a very high level and still do. And so there's a lesson, I think, to learn here on how we handle those types of things. There's a timeline I want to cover here. From 2022 to 2023, with unspecified dates, but leading up until right before the release of Sound of Freedom in July, on July 4th, there was an internal OUR investigation, Operation Underground Railroad investigation. The investigation paralleled, to some degree, a secondary investigation by Troy Rawlings of Davis County, the Attorney General of, the District Attorney of Davis County, that was looking into OUR and financial issues with donations and how they were spent, and if they're actually going toward what the 501(c) was actually claiming. In that investigation, the result came out from a press release when asked in June of this year, of 2023, that that Tim was not found guilty of any sexual harassment. That was the issue. It was sexual harassment from complaints of several women that were employees of OUR. However, that same month, in June, the board of OUR, which is comprised mostly of family members and close friends of Tim, forced him out. So while they said there was no issues and they didn't find any problems, there's an issue there, right? He was forced out, and he moved out of OUR and landed at what is now called the Spear Fund, which is similar to what OUR is. It's involved with the trafficking and organs and different things that the Nazarene Fund from Glenn Beck, for example, that Tim was the CEO of also. It pulls all these together and helps fund and raise funds for all of them. July 4th, 2023, the Sound of Freedom premiered. My wife and I went to this on July 4th. I had been trying to get a hold of Tim previous to the release of this. I wanted to talk about this. And on July 6th, I interviewed Tim Ballard. Not knowing any of these allegations were coming at the time, or about the OUR internal investigation. It was very typical of someone who was asking questions about trafficking of children, especially. That was the focus. How do you do this? How can you mentally absorb what you're doing from year after year after year into this dark, dark world? I had him explain that. We went over the operations and what they took care of. Just basically, Tim, tell me how things are with Operation Underground Railroad and the sex trafficking world. On the 19th, and there's a reason why I'm going through this timeline here, but on the 19th, President Trump confirms he will host viewing of Sound of Freedom. On July 31st, Trump appears on the Tim Ballard podcast. And then on September 15th, the Vice article and the church statement to Vice, that was very controversial, came out. Now, I want to stop there for a minute and go through this timeline as a whole, because this becomes an issue of truth right here. Tim has always been attacked by the media. He's a very conservative individual. A lot of the left-leaning media have always gone after him. That includes influencers within the church. And I would suggest that at least for some of that, there's probably basis for that. But others, it was just a matter of political points of view. Sound of Freedom comes out, and it's wildly successful. It's reported that he's now made somewhere in the area of about $40 million. This is important. Just off of the movie, he has a nonprofit organization that is paid by a number of the, has a for-profit organization that is paid by many, if not all, of his nonprofit organizations that goes to him. My point is this. The arguments from Tim's team when the Vice article came out on September 15th, many of them were, look, Tim has become so popular. He's got this positive movie. There are forces around the world that are trying to crush him. He's got a lot of money now. They can go after him. All of these things are true. But are they a reason to suggest that nothing has gone on with Tim? That these allegations are not true? Because many, many, many people take this narrative here and say, this is what is happening, because we've seen it over and over again. With the allegations of the women, which is going to come up in a lawsuit here shortly, all of a sudden he's running for Senate. All of a sudden he has a ton of money. Those are questionable. Right? Now all of a sudden you have women that are coming after him. So is this politically motivated? Is it financially motivated? I think to some degree it is, but that doesn't mean it's not true. This is what many people say, right? That is the narrative, and they're going to stick with Tim no matter what. The forces of evil around the globe are against him. Okay, that's one side of the story. And this is what I'm dealing with as I go through this. Now, on the 15th, the Vice article comes out. I then do a commentary on this on September 18th, the day I leave to go out of the country for a week and a half. That becomes important to me because as I am working with all of these camps, I am out of the country and on the exact opposite time frame, and so I am doing this all in the middle of the night, speaking mostly to individuals in Utah and California, and trying to assess what is actually happening here. On the 20th and the 21st, In a hotel in Cairo, I interviewed two of the alleged victims that are not seeking me out. I want to make that clear. On the 22nd, I give a second commentary out on this. These are very popular commentaries on YouTube. I am not drawing conclusions on these, but I'm putting information out and some suggestions on how to follow this. And then on October 10th, there are two civil lawsuits that are filed, one by 5 alleged female victims, and another one by a married couple. This will also prove to be important, that second one especially. All right, I want to go over this because this is people when this first came out in Vice News, this article was really caused a stir. It involved President Ballard. It had a very odd statement from the church, or many people believed it was not from the church, and it was very difficult to parse out exactly what was happening in this article. Let me go to that here, and I want to just cover a couple points on this. Okay. Can you see this article?
Not very well.
Yep.
Yes, we can.
Thank you. Just want to make sure. All right. So I want you to notice the headline on this. Mormon Church denounces Tim Ballard's morally unacceptable activities. This is the right headline, but people don't catch this, right? They're not catching what is happening here. First of all, to go back to the narrative that supports Tim, this is Vice News. Vice is horribly anti-Mormon. They have written atrocious articles about the church, about the most ridiculous things you can think of. They have put on videos of the temple ceremony out to the public and mocking them. They're horribly anti-Mormon. And so here comes the narrative now with the statement from the church and why this must not be from the church. Why would the church give a statement to Vice News? Well, if we come back down here and take a look at what the actual statement says, starting right here, I want to read this whole thing here because this is important to understand because it helps us unravel a little bit of the truth and what's going on. President Ballard and Tim Ballard, no relation, established a friendship a number of years ago. That friendship was built on this is over a decade ago. That friendship was built on a shared interest in looking after God's children wherever they are and without regard to their circumstance. However, that relationship is in the past. So you can see what is happening is the church is trying to distance themselves from Tim. They are protecting President Ballard and they are distancing themselves from Tim here. For many months, President Ballard has had no contact with the founder of Operation Underground Railroad. Okay, that's not that long of a period of time. It's only a few months. Tim is busy. President Ballard is busy. It's really not that long of a period of time. The nature of that relationship was always in support of vulnerable children being abused, trafficked, and otherwise neglected. Once it became clear Tim Ballard had betrayed their friendship, through the unauthorized use of President Ballard's name for Tim Ballard's personal advantage and activity regarded as morally unacceptable. I'm going to come back to that. President Ballard withdrew his association. So this was just a few months ago, or a few months prior to this statement. President Ballard never authorized his name or the name of the church to be used for Tim's personal or financial interests. We're going to come back to 2 points on this. In addition, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints never endorsed, supported, or represented OUR Tim Ballard or any projects associated with them. President Ballard loves children all over the world. It has been his mission in life's work to look after them, care for them, and point them to their Savior. Now, I will get back to President Ballard's involvement. I'm not going to talk a lot about this, but they were close associates, right? They worked closely together. They worked closely together with Operation Underground Railroad, sometimes very specifically on operations. I will say this because this is out there. There is video of this. There is testimony of this. But, you know, there was recently an allegation that was being amended to a lawsuit saying that President Ballard had given records, tithing records, to OUR or to Tim Ballard of those that would be wealthy donors. And, you know, the church has come out and completely denied that, but President Ballard did find donors, right? He did find donors for Tim and for OUR. Why? Well, because he believed that what Tim was doing was very righteous and very positive in saving kids. And so he was helping to find people that could help support that cause. Personally, I kind of wish they would have come out and just stated that, because just uncover it, but they didn't. Secondly, then here at the bottom, in addition, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints never endorsed. Okay, they didn't, but President Ballard did. President Ballard did endorse this, maybe not publicly, but to donors, he did do that. And again, it was because he believed in what the cause was here. And this is corroborated by numerous testimonies of other individuals that were involved with donations. But you'll notice back here, there's two things that he mentions here. One is mentioning Elder Ballard's name. This Tim completely denies, but there are a number of individuals that say he did do this. And not only did he do this in for raising funds, but he did this based on the allegations of the women to accomplish some of the alleged sexual harassment. Okay, saying that President Ballard supported him. So when we see here this statement that comes from Doug Anderson, a 15-year veteran in the communications department in Salt Lake for the church, this is the statement of the church. This is not a rogue statement. This is what has kind of gone out there. This is not Doug Anderson just going off on his own and writing this. This is the church's statement, and this comes from the highest levels. And I have sources there too. This is coming from the highest levels. Now, why would they do this? I don't know if this is the best way to do this, but this here, I believe, is one of the reasons they did it. When they say morally acceptable here, I do not believe personally that they are just talking about using President Ballard's name. I believe that they are talking about what is coming here with the alleged the allegations from the women about Tim. And so as they see this problem, I believe, these are assumptions by me only, that the church already knows what these allegations are and what is going to be coming to the public. There is a channel that we are all aware of that would go eventually directly to the highest levels, where church leaders would have an inside knowledge of what would have happened with these women. And I believe they already knew. They already knew what the allegations were. They knew how bad they were and how messy this was. And I believe that is why they gave this statement. and put this out with even a hard left anti-religious publication like Vice News, because they were told that this article was going to be released and asked if they had a statement. And with the knowledge that they already had, again, my belief here, they went ahead and put this strong, very strong statement out, basically steamrolling Tim Ballard in the process. Now, again, is this the right way to do it? I don't know. But I believe that that is why they did it. They already knew what the allegations were. They already knew what the problems were. And they were trying to distance themselves as fast as they could with this. Okay. Now let me get here to. Okay. So again, just to clarify here, this comes out on September 15th. This is the church statement. It is not fake and it is not rogue. It comes from the very highest levels here. And that kind of starts everything off. Now, briefly, I don't want to go into all this. Of course, President Ballard has just passed away here. And so that makes it even, I don't know, even more reverence I want to have on this. But there is business. There is a business association here with Tim. We don't know the full extent of this yet, but I do know that President Ballard's son is involved with this. Donations, definitely, right? He did help in support with donations with OUR and organizations that Tim was in charge of and founded. Okay, so that's as far as I'm going to go with that. All right. This is the crux of the whole problem. And with what is going on with the allegations of the women, right? Again, 5 women on one end, in one of the lawsuits, and then a couple in the other. The couple is, the woman is another alleged victim. It's her and her husband that are filing the lawsuit. Now, I don't know. I have heard this from both, 2 different sides on this. Whether this was Tim's original idea, I would lean toward this. I believe it is. But there are others that have said that it was Janet's idea. Now, I'll go over who Janet is in a minute. That this is part of this is the strangest part of this entire story, is going to be Janet. But let's assume that it's Tim's idea. All right. His idea is to put together what is called a couples ruse. And this basically meant, look, there's going to be, when I go out into these operations, because Tim goes out personally into the operations, and he's in these cesspools in these areas where they are trafficking women and children. His idea is, I will bring someone who will act as my girlfriend. And the reason he wants her there is because if there is someone who is, because you're going into places like strip clubs and massage parlors and other places like this, right? Bad places. And so the way you do this is he pretends to be someone looking for these activities for the trafficking, right? Especially the children. And when these opportunities would come up, because sometimes they would come out and say, okay, well, we have someone here for you. Then what would happen is the girlfriend could be there as a jealous girlfriend and say, no, she acts very rough, just like he would, right? The lowest of the low on the earth. But she would be jealous and say, he's not doing this. He's for me and only for me, right? So that's what the couple's ruse would be. They would play this game and go in together into these different places. The problem is that can become a very nebulous thing. And so the problems from the lawsuits, from the allegations of the women, come in these ideas of training where Tim would allegedly ask the women to go into character and to learn to be intimate with him before they would ever go out on these operations. And so to go through this, right, he would suggest different things, and the allegation from the women is that he was grooming them through a few different channels, a few different ways of doing this. And then he would say that even before going out to the operations, and these are all over the globe, Thailand, Mexico, the Caribbean, Dominican Republic, all over the place, they needed to be in character 24/7, and that they needed to practice this, and that even when they were out on the operations, even when they're not in front of other people, they need to stay in character and be comfortable physically with each other. Okay, this is the whole crux of the issue here with the allegations, is this couple's ruse. Now, I want to go into two of the women here that made allegations. They are part of the 5 that are in the lawsuit number 1. And I think that this is important to understand. They did not seek me out. A lot of people, when it came out with the second commentary, after I had interviewed both of them, said, well, why would these women go out and find this podcaster and give him this information? It's obviously politically motivated. They're trying to get a story out there, et cetera, et cetera. Well, they didn't seek me out, right? I was connected to them by people that I highly trust. And it wasn't even planned. I was on the phone with them in Cairo, Egypt, middle of the night, talking to them, and it was, hey, you know what, let me call so-and-so. And this is someone, how do I say, very, very connected to all of the women and to the operations of Operation Underground Railroad. And so it was impromptu. Secondarily, it was stated oftentimes when I put this out that they must have given me a statement. So they seeked me out and they gave me this statement, and I just basically am regurgitating it. That isn't true either. My wife was in the room. She can attest to this. I interviewed them. They had no statement for me. They simply said, what do you want to know? It's like, okay, I guess I'll do this. What do you want to know? And this was highly uncomfortable for them, and it was very uncomfortable for me because I asked some very specific questions about this. And I will tell you overall that they were very credible, right? This is, and the 2 that I interviewed were separate on separate nights for me, days for them, right? They were 2 individuals. They were not together. They were one single woman and one married woman. I could say that. And I asked them my own questions. And what I want to do here, because I'm not going to put, this is part of what I'm not going to put on in writing, right? What I'm going to do is I am going to read a little bit, some excerpts from some of the notes that I took from these interviews. And I will try to be appropriate and pick the appropriate things here, or so this is from September 20th. These are not individuals that I've ever received the names from. I probably know who one of the 2 are. But here are some things that were stated by them in this. Wait, I'm going to need some glasses for this. Well, maybe not. We'll attempt without it here. Tim has a process it's not really training. He goes through the same script over and over again with each of the women. There's just some excerpts that I'm putting out here. I would guess that there are roughly 14 different women at a minimum that have gone through this with Tim. He grooms everyone the same. One of the questions that is often asked is, what would you do to save a kid? He tells everyone, and this has been corroborated from other sources, that this comes from God. Each of these women both said, I don't know if I've got this in the notes on the other one here, but each of these women said that Elder Ballard said to use the psychic and what she says and follow her. The psychic would recommend that they act as boyfriend and girlfriend and as a couple, and if necessary, that they need to be intimate with each other. They need to be seen as a couple. I'm not going to go over that. And here's a little more. These are my notes on this. One of them said that only Tim was really focused on the couple's ruse. Why weren't other individuals involved with the couple's ruse? Right now, I will say that Tim's camp denies that. But I'm sorry, I've got to pass up a lot of this. He is an incredible manipulator. He is a spiritual manipulator. He told me that God chose me for this. You didn't choose this, God chose this. Well, can't go there. One of them said that Tim's wife doesn't know. The women were always very attractive that went with him. Tim's family still run the board at OUR. That's true. One said that at least a couple of marriages have broken up because of this. Some of the husbands, this was back in September, probably still don't know. And also, the husbands are one of the primary reasons, later I learned, that the lawsuits were filed. They pushed this the hardest. I will say that Tim's camp says that there were only 1 or 2 married women. The other women here say that that's not true. Okay. I have a lot more here. I can't go into for more than that. It's pretty explicit. If you wanted to, and I'll show you this in a minute here. I don't think we're going to cover that, but okay. So this is going into the lawsuits here. The focus is on the couple's ruse. This is everything. This is where the allegations come from. This is where the allegations of basically grooming the women come from. Here is a section that comes out of one of those lawsuits. It is, the women he chose had no formal training in paramilitary activities or operations. That's not completely true. Paramilitary, yes, that's true. But there is military training with at least one. but he knew they were devoted to the OUR mission of saving women and children. And this is one of the odd things that I think about with this. If you are running international undercover operations, and you have, in some cases, stay-at-home moms who are volunteering for OUR, are all of a sudden moved to the position of being in operations, undercover, with a couple's ruse. That's not only suspicious, that is dangerous, right? That is very dangerous to be doing that. And the vast majority, for sure, were not trained in anything, whether it was psychological, undercover, military, nothing. He knew they were devoted to the OUR mission of saving women and children from traffickers. Ballard claims that he implemented strict rules regarding the couple's ruse. No kissing on the lips and no touching or exposing private parts. Ballard soon began abusing the couple's ruse and eventually used the ruse as a tool for sexual grooming. Okay, so he had these rules. It's interesting. He had a woman, the very first woman that came in with his idea of the couple's ruse is a woman named Marisol. And Marisol is public. She's, as far as I know, she's not part of any of the lawsuits. She was an actress in Los Angeles, and she was the first one to go out and work in this couple's ruse. When this article hit from Vice on September 15th, just a few days later, Marisol, who has a YouTube channel and has had Tim on the channel many times, went over the couple's ruse with Tim and talking about what it was. And one of the things they emphasized was these rules. You're not allowed to touch anywhere other than maybe on the arm. You can't kiss. You can't do any of these things. Interestingly, the day after she put this up, she took it down. I just want to go to a couple of the excerpts here on these lawsuits. You've seen one here. I'm going to go to lawsuit one, which is Adobe. And I apologize for this being a little bit small. I could not, this is direct from the courts. So it's signed as an Adobe document and I can't alter it or highlight it or anything. Just want to read this section here, okay? Starting at 65 up here, Ballard began a program for women accompanying him on ops and called the program the Couple's Ruse. Ballard claimed that the Couple's Ruse was an undercover tool to prevent detection by pedophiles when Ballard would not engage in sexual touching of the trafficked women offered up to him in strip clubs and massage parlors across the world. Ballard would choose a woman who worked at OUR. These are all women, all the allegations are coming from women that worked at OUR or were hired for this specifically. Most of them had already been at OUR. Or would invite a well-intentioned volunteer to be trained in the couple's ruse. The women who he chose had no formal training. This is what we had before in paramilitary activities, but he knew they were devoted to the OUR mission of saving women and children from traffickers. Don't want to go further on this. Again, here, before they were ever went undercover together, Ballard insisted that he first needed to ensure that he and his female counterparts in the couple's ruse had physical chemistry that would be obvious to those they would meet during an operation. And then you're going to go on this. This is the first one. This is by the 5 women. And there's going to be several different examples of promiscuous activity that he required of them. And most of this is not when they are on the operations. All right, some of it is, but most of it is not. There are some allegations of things that happened while they were on the operations, where the women were put in a very difficult situation, to the point where, how do I be appropriate with this, where one of them had to run out because she alleged that Tim was not watching out for her. She had to leave without him. And then I want one other excerpt here from the second lawsuit, which is by the couple. And this is by the husband here at the very end of the lawsuit. He has a statement here. Tim realizes the depth of destruction he has caused to not only me, but to other husbands and the women he decided to victimize. One of the women said that there is more than one marriage that has been destroyed over this, allegedly. There was one more piece here, maybe I was gonna. Okay, these are some of the things that he would recurringly say based on this woman. All right, traffickers can smell pheromones. We are doing this for the greater good. This is all for the new covenant. I see angels all around. Catherine chose you. That's his wife. These aren't our real bodies. Jesus gave us our bodies to use like this, referring to the couple's ruse. Our bodies are a tool. I would do anything to save a child. How far would you go? Janet, who is the psychic, and Lori said you would never turn on me. Okay. So again, these are allegations, right? Tim denies all of this. And again, the story on this for those that support Tim is he's got a bunch of money. The women are all going after the money. And the timing is very suspect. Okay. Now, I am missing something here. Hold on. Skipped right through. Interesting. I'm missing something here. Okay. So let me go to something else here. There is a woman, and this is a very important part of the story. There is a woman named Janet Russin. Janet Russin is a member of the church. She is a self-declared psychic. And much of what Tim does, based on not just the women, these are people in Tim's camp and at Operation Underground Railroad. A lot of what Tim does is based off of what this psychic tells him. This psychic, how do I say this? This psychic claims that she speaks consistently with the Mormon prophet Nephi, and that Nephi is directing a lot of these operations with OUR, down to very specific issues. I have also been told by more than one source that Tim claims that Janet Russin, speaking to Nephi, said that Nephi told her to tell Tim that he is going to be both the prophet of the church and the president of the United States. And so we start getting into some very, very odd areas here with this, where not only is Tim following what is being stated there, but he's taking what is being said, relaying it to those around him, including the women and other operatives, and telling them what needs to be done, to the point of where we need to go in the world, who we need to take, who needs to be leading the operation. And So you've got an organization, a dangerous operations that are being dictated and executed through the words of a psychic who is speaking with Nephi. Okay. I want to share here, if this will work, a little bit of audio from this woman. And let's see here. There we go. Okay, this is from Blaze Media. Blaze is owned by Glenn Beck. Glenn Beck is an associate of Tim Ballard. They have been in business a lot in the past. Glenn is now distancing himself quite a bit, and so they have a series running on Tim Ballard. Part of what they broke here a couple of days ago is this reading from Janet Russin. I hope this works. Can you hear that?
No, not really.
Not really. Okay, hold on. Let me try it one more time here. I'm just going to...
I can just barely hear a voice.
You're probably getting it from the wrong speakers. Hold on here. See if I can change the settings here. Share sound. Here we go. Let's see if this works now. Here we go. Let's try it.
Tell me about my new position as CEO
That work?
again at OUR.
Yes.
You're reading from Nephi.
Okay,
Tell me about my new.
Okay, I want you to listen to the very beginning of this. What she says is, this is your reading from Nephi. When she starts this.
You're reading from Nephi. Tell me about my new position as CEO again at OUR. How is it right? How will it improve things? How or what counsel things do I need to do? Nephi says, /are aware the timing of this move is correct and timely. We've timed it. You're never alone in these endeavors, Tim. You're always accompanied by angels / helpers. Heavenly help. You know this. It's the rhythm of life. If only we could enlighten more of God's children of this, and if only they acted upon or along with that enlightenment. The tools are available, and by the way, the basic rudimentary unit of faith and the most beautiful purpose.
Okay. All right. So that just gives you an idea, right? It's not a fake thing. This is something, there are apparently, allegedly over 10,000 pages written out by Janet Russin for these revelations that she's getting from Nephi and others about OUR, about Tim. This one here is about him. This is since the fallout. This was her saying that Nephi says that he is going to be put back in as the CEO of Operation Underground Railroad. Okay. All right. Just going to finish up here then. All right. So the lessons here that I want to go over that I think are really important. Tim has a very, very large following. I know a lot of these individuals. And many of them, fewer now, but many of them still support him and think there's something wrong with the church. And I think that as I've gone through this, and I've been up all night when I was going through this, and I'm listening to people I know, and they're all saying the opposite things. And I'm trying to decide what is truth here. What is actually true? The whole timing issue and the women going after the money, okay, that makes sense to me. But I spoke to these women, and right, one of these women is suicidal over everything that she's gone through. I don't. I find them very, very credible. I just, the things that I asked, the specifics that I immediately was given, the pause of uncomfortability on the hard questions, they were very credible to me. And so this idea that I think is for all of us to understand is what I'm trying to relay here, is that we're going to see more and more, I believe, of this. And where there is an information war, that's how I felt. I felt that there was this mass disinformation war that I was in the middle of, in this storm. And I was like, how do I parse this out? How do I cut through all the mists here to find the truth? And it was a matter of me having to sit back and pull everything together and understand what was happening from the very beginning in order to try and get to a point where I believe and am comfortable with what I think is going on here, right? We need to be careful about creating dichotomies between the events, individuals, and heroes on one side and the church and the gospel on the other. There have been many politically on the left, for example, that have had a lot of issues with the LGBTQ issues and the church. And now on the right, you see the issues where you have the COVID shot that the prophet took, and that we need to be good citizens. And a lot of church members have a problem with that, not just because they disagree with it, but because they felt like, well, I love the prophet and he's doing something I don't believe in. And I just think, look, we've got to take a step back from those things, from people that, from ideas and political movements and individuals and events, and sit back and say, what is my testimony rooted in? There are going to be mists of darkness, and they're probably going to get thicker around us right now. How do I find truth, and how do I hang on to the iron rod as I move forward? So for me, that's the lesson to pull from this more than anything else. Be careful where you put your values and what you put at the top, and just make sure that nothing else gets put up there aside from the Savior and the gospel, right? And your testimony, because there's going to be attacks constantly on this. And in the age of the internet and what AI is doing, artificial intelligence, on communications right now, it's going to get tougher and tougher. So anyway, with that, are there any questions or clarification that I can offer?
Well, let me start with a couple of questions of my own. The movie. Do you have any thought as to how accurate the movie is? I will say at the outset that I was stunned at the quality of the movie. The acting, Jim Caviezel is a phenomenal actor. The musical score was first class. The cinematography was incredible, and the story was rather compelling. But all that leaves open the question of whether or not it's a good story, perhaps amplified and exaggerated, or whether it's really false at its core. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I do, yeah. So that's a very good question. The story of the two kids, I think that is the reason they focused on that. That was not the first operation. The first operation was actually going after an LDS kid, but that they didn't get to. But that was one of the first ones. That was one of the early ones that they had gone on. Those two kids are real. They were saved. And the kids on the island were saved. And there were not just, I think they had said 60 or plus in the movie. There were over 100 from the reports that I got that were actually saved on that island. So those are true. And I have seen pictures, real pictures of those kids with, if you remember, there was the pedophile that he was working with to try and get the information. And he gave him a book. And he has, there's a picture of that real pedophile with the book that Tim gave him with the writing from Tim inside it. So those things are all true, it appears. All those things are true. Now, did Tim go out and go into the jungle and kill a trafficking leader and save the kid? No, that part is not true. So there's parts that were, under artistic license, I suppose, from Angel Studios and originally Disney Studios. Yeah, the crux of the story is true.
I guess one thing that I found interesting about it was the strong pitch. I mean, it was in addition to being a good story, Cavazil comes in the end and pitches you really hard to contribute to this cause.
Yeah,
which is must be where the $40 million that came to Ballard.
Yeah, I don't know. I think actually the $40 million that comes to Ballard is actually on the movie rights. That money I know went through Angel Studios. I don't know where it went from there. I don't know. I don't know where those funds where those funds ended up. But they could have ended up at OUR. They could have ended up at the Spear Fund, which is where Tim is at. I don't know.
And I also wanted to ask you, just generally speaking, were all these women LDS then?
No. They're not LDS, but most of them are. There is a new article out from Vice that just came out in the last couple of days of another woman. She was in the military. She's the only one I know of that had any military training whatsoever, or even police training. And she did have training in social work and trauma with kids. And so she was recruited, brought in, put on several missions, or a couple of missions at least. And but I don't believe that she is part of either of the lawsuits. She comes from a different angle. She's just giving some details, but she wasn't involved as much with Tim.
Larry Peterson asked a couple of questions that are interesting. First of all, what's the status of Ballard's wife and family? And secondly, what's Tim's status in the church today?
Okay. Status is he's with his wife. Last reported, his wife is supporting him. She's been they're in Utah. There's a talk radio show called Rod Arquette. She's gone on there. She's been public on social media. So she supports him. And the kids and everyone else, I'm not sure. I know that one of the kids was actually brought to some of the strip clubs with Tim as he was working on a couple's ruse and things. So I don't know how involved he is. The second part, what is Tim's status in the church?
Status in the church.
I can't comment on that.
There have been reports that he's been excommunicated. Are those just reports, or is there any truth to them?
I can't say. I'm not going to say.
Other questions or comments from anyone, please raise your hand or just put in the chat or just go ahead and talk. Let's see. Here's a comment. It says, I've always wondered about the propriety of undercover police work and espionage in light of Scripture. I generally believe that it's hard for a person to engage in deception repeatedly without having it affect that person in a negative way. Do you know Tim well enough to know how this activity may have affected him?
I don't know him well enough, but I asked him that in the interview that I had with him. It's just so weird that I interviewed him a month before all of this came up. And so I asked him that, how do you do this? How do you hang on to this? And how can you go through this constantly? Because you're in such a horrible world, and whether these allegations are true or not, the stress, the horror that you would go through in these types of situations, I think there are several reports that he turned to drugs and alcohol to try and cope.
Question, Tim seems to be pretty well known. How could he travel around the world undercover, given the fact that he and his organization are so well known?
That's a very good question. And that's what a number of the women had said that were involved. They didn't know that he would actually be the one involved in the operations at first. How could someone who's recognized be in undercover? Their claim in Tim's camp is that he would dye his hair and had colored lenses, contact lenses, and maybe grew a beard sometimes, and that would change his look, and then just the way he would act. That's an excellent question.
Another question I have is, as a lawyer, which I am, I've been I've seen individuals fall under the sway of very persuasive individuals, and things that in hindsight are just bizarre. How somebody who's had any grounding at all in any level of intelligence who could believe that this psychic is telling him that Nephi is giving information, etc. It sounds just so bizarre that these women must have been daft to have swallowed it hook, line, and sinker. But again, I know that people can be very gullible, and some people can be very persuasive, and they prey on individuals who are very gullible. But that just seems to be in hindsight, just all those red flags are going off, and people were apparently ignoring them.
Yeah, I think so. I think there's a couple things there. One is, again, how daft are they? I don't know. One of the arguments is, look, the women are adults. They know what they're doing. They know what they're getting into. They can make their own decisions. And that's all true, right? That's all true. The question is are you being put in an environment where someone else who apparently is a hero, a strong member of the church, has a strong wife behind him, is doing unbelievably positive work, and how much does that cover everything up? And so if you're just laying things down, what they would claim on the grooming side of things, for example, is that they would be given these burner phones. And the burner cell phones would be, he'd say, okay, well, what we have to do is we have to dirty them up. And so this is where he would break the ice, where they would talk dirty to each other, so that if someone was going to someone was going to take their cell phone, which apparently had happened previously, and they were exposed as not being who they said they were, that they would already have this on there, and they would show the kind of person that they were. But there was just kind of these little things where he would, if you read through the lawsuits, it's allegations of, you just need to sit on my lap for a little bit, just these little things, little by little by little by little, until he's got them in the shower with him, until he's doing other things, and telling him that Elder Ballard, has approved this, and that the psychic has spoken to Nephi. And so, I think it's more kind of, I hate to say it like this, but line upon line, right? If the allegations are true, it's just kind of a next level manipulation on a very high end, where you actually have an environment where you would be able to pull that off.
I don't know if you've heard, just fairly recently, I think it's Mormon Land from the Salt Lake Tribune had an interview with Benjamin Park, is historian, of some renown, who's written a number of books and actually has appeared on our fireside programs before. And he notes that that Ballard's, if you will, charades or manipulation extends to his historical work as well. I mean, he's written these books that used to be in Deseret Book. I understand they're not anymore, but what is it? The Lincoln hypothesis, and then there's the Washington hypothesis, and it really takes great liberty with very few facts to make a case that Lincoln wrote the Emancipation Proclamation because he just read the Book of Mormon that he got from the library, etc. And George Washington, I guess, was influenced by I don't know, an angel or something like that, maybe Moroni, and those are pretty far fetched. But apparently, he was pretty successful at those books.
Yeah, so very successful with those books. I have spoken. I can tell you that I have spoken to scholars that would be in his political camp and in the idea of an American covenant, like Tim pushes, that say they also are very suspect about the claims that he makes with Washington. And there are some things that are there, but they're very suspect about tying this directly in with almost a Mormon history with Washington and Lincoln.
Yeah. But again, it's sort of how far people can fall. I believe that up until recently, those books were being actively promoted by Deseret Book, which is
yes,
very interesting.
Yeah, and he has several of them.
Yeah. Well, interesting. Other questions or comments? You've got some favorable comments in the chat. I hope you're looking at those where people have appreciated you taking the time to talk to us and recognize that it's a difficult subject. And I think Janet makes a really good point. She says the cult of personality emerges most easily when imperfections in the traditional gatekeepers of authority, the scientific method and academic peer review process, journalism, law, and policing, religious institutions are shown to be less than perfect and then discarded for being imperfect, which I think is a great summary.
Yeah, and I think, look, I haven't given many of my conclusions here, but I think a lot of this is obvious. And I think that comment there of a cult of personality is right at the center of all of this.
Yeah.
I really do. I think that there is just we can get to a level of ego that look at the world that he lives in, right? He lives in a world where seemingly to him at least, and I guess to those around him, he's outside of the boundaries of following commandments and protocols of the church, right? Because of the world that he lives in and what his work is. So he's outside of that world to a degree, or he got a foot out of it. And then he's outside of the world of law, where it's whose law am I really prescribing to here? Because he oftentimes, based on these allegations and the women on these operations, he does not oftentimes contact the countries that he's going to. He had one woman come back to the U.S. from Mexico and the Caribbean, continuing to use a burner phone, asking about child pornography and getting child trafficking. You can imagine if someone caught her with that phone, and she could be in a lot of trouble because she's doing this in the U.S. while she's waiting to go on her next operation. And so, you've got someone that seemingly kind of lives beyond these laws and these rules, and also you add in that cult of personality, and I think you've got the ingredients of something dangerous there.
Yeah, for sure. Brett, Smith, were you going to say something? I didn't quite catch that.
No.
Okay, well, I'll ask you to give a benediction here in just a minute, if you would be willing to do that, please. Thank you again for a delightful evening, a very inspirational and informative presentation. That's very, very interesting. One of the hot button topics of our day, I'm sure. Let me just tell you a little bit about where we're going next week and invite you all to attend. Next Saturday, we'll hear from Matthew Godfrey. Matt was until recently the general editor of the Joseph Smith Papers and the senior managing historian for outreach and engagement for the Church History Library. Matt is a fascinating speaker who's spoke to us early on regarding the Joseph Smith Papers, and it seems just terribly appropriate that he should now give us a summary of what the Joseph Smith Papers have accomplished. They have just come to an end with their last volume, and just really an incredible experience. And this new disclosures concerning Joseph Smith and the world in which he lived, the influences, etc. One that is of great interest to me is the legal implications of Joseph Smith's history. And we're just beginning to appreciate now how significant those legal implications were. I'm a trial lawyer, and I can tell you that Joseph Smith was probably in court more than the most active trial lawyer that you know. He was regularly in court, probably over 200 times, during his very relatively short 14-year career as a prophet. So he's going to know more about Joseph Smith Papers and the project, what is accomplished, and what it means for the rest of the church now as we put that project to rest. So I'm delighted that he has agreed to speak to us again. That'll be next week. We'll hear from him about the history of the Joseph Smith Papers project and how church members can best utilize these resources that are now available. So thanks again to all of you for listening. Double thanks for Matt for talking to us tonight. And Greg, my wife is correcting me here. Greg here. And let me just, there's one other question I see that I didn't get a chance to, but John Wright has asked, what has been the impact on the work of our Underground Railroad?
Yeah, so I, from what I understand, first of all, I want to say, for example, the two women that I spoke to, both were reticent. This is before the lawsuits came through. They were both reticent to say anything or come out or file a lawsuit because they were worried about bringing down OUR. Right? These are both women that have been involved with the organization for a long time. They believed in what they were doing, and we'll see what happens there. I have spoken to people on the inside there that are not sure that it can survive. We'll see where the lawsuits go. There's now a criminal investigation into Tim, by the way, that is also begun. So we'll see if there are anything comes of that, and how OUR is maybe brought into that as well.
Great. Well, thanks again for your information tonight and your presentation.
I really appreciate
Brent,
the invitation.
You bet. Brent, would you like to close us with prayer tonight? Brent, are you there? We're not hearing you. I wonder if you're muted.
Am I unmuted now?
Now you are. Yes.
Okay. Dear Heavenly Father, we're thankful for this interesting evening that we've had. In this discussion, we are thankful for the opportunity that we have weekly to come and have interesting topics. We're thankful for the gospel in our lives. We pray thy Spirit will be with us in all things. In the name of thy Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
I want to wish you all a good Sabbath tomorrow, and hope to see you next week. Good night.
Thank you, everyone.